Welcome to Study Time, a televised home learning program produced by Rwanda Education Board.
Hello learners, welcome to TV learning program. I'm teacher Aggrey, a teacher of economics. Today I'm going to learn with senior 6 students, and we are going to learn on unit 4, which is balance of payment. It will be our lesson 3, where we are going to continue with the structure of balance of payment and the calculation of balance of trade. You remember very well, learners, in the previous lesson, we talked about the balance of payment account. What is it composed of? Now, we are going to continue by looking at the format or the structure of a balance of payment account. Now, this is a format of balance of payment account, learners, or a structure of a balance of payment account, which is like a balance sheet of a balance of payment account. Now, this structure of balance of payment account, learners, it has the debit side and it has a credit side, because an account has 2 sides, the debit side and the credit side. And the balance of payment account, it takes the form of the double entry accounting principle. Learners, you remember very well, you studied about accounting in senior 5. Who can tell us about the double entry accounting principle? How does it state? Who can tell us? Someone is telling me that the principle of double entry states that every debit transaction, every debit entry should have a corresponding credit entry. When you debit a transaction, you also credit a transaction. Now, on this side, on the debit side, we have imports, learners, and on the credit side, we have exports, learners. And on the credit side, we are recording exports. Why do we record exports on the credit side? Because exports, we are recording exports on the credit side because when we export, we generate income, because exportation is the selling of goods and services to other countries. When you export, you generate income. And incomes are credited because they increase capital. That's why on exports are recorded on the credit side. Then, why do we record imports on the debit side, learners? We record imports on the debit side because importation is all about buying goods and services from other countries. When you buy from other countries, you spend. And when you spend, those are expenses, and expenses are debited because they reduce capital. That's why we are recording imports on the debit side, because it is an outflow, while exports is on the credit side because it is an inflow. Now, you remember very well, learners, on the current accounts, when we are studying about the balance of payment account, the components of a balance of payment account, we said on the current account it has 3 accounts, where we have the visible trade account, where we record goods imported, or on imports, goods imported. This X represents the figures, the values. Then on export, we shall record goods exported, incomes generated. Then a current account has also a visible trade account, because in visible trade account, we record services imported and services exported. These are services imported on the current account and even services exported on the current account. Then transfer payments, we also have the transfer payment on the current account, because we said on transfer payments, that is the amount of money received when you have not rendered a service. An example, those are donations, gifts. Now, if a country receives a donation from another country, this will be recorded on the transfer payment account. When we give out a donation to other countries, this will be recorded on the transfer payments account. Now, on the capital account, learners will record the capital movements. Those are capital inflows and capital outflows. Capital inflows in form of loans received from other countries, even loans given to other countries. Now, on the capital account, we have loans to foreigners. If a country gives out a loan, this will be recorded on the capital account. And even in foreign investments. Now, investments in other country, when we invest in another country, that is an outflow. It is recorded on the capital account. Then loans from foreigners, it will be recorded. If we have received on the loan, it is recorded here on the capital account, even investment by foreigners, if we have foreigners investing in the country. Then on the cash account, remember well learners, on the cash account, which is the monetary account, this is the balancing item account. So that we are having here accommodating items and autonomous items. Now, in order for these two sides to balance, the figure on the debit side and the figure on the credit side to balance, now if expenditure on imports is greater than the earnings on exports, we shall use accommodating items in order to close the gap, so that the figures should balance. Now, we use accommodating items in case the expenditure on imports is greater than the earnings on exports. Like we can borrow from other countries in order for the figures to balance. Then on autonomous items, when the earnings on export, on goods and services sold, when it is greater than the expenditure, we shall use autonomous items if the figures are not balancing. We shall use the autonomous items. Now, we can give loans to other countries, that is, in order to dispose of a surplus so that the figures should balance. Then on errors and omissions, it is also a balancing item account. On errors and omissions, in case you have made an error, a mistake, and the two sides are not balancing, we have to correct the mistake. Now, the error must be added or subtracted in order for the two sides to balance. This is what we call the format of a BOP account. Now, learners, we are going to continue with calculations of balance of trade. This is our balance of trade of 2 years. We have 215 and 215. We have items per year, exports, goods, services, imports. On imports, we have goods, services, transfers to the other country, from the other country. We have capital flows, inflows, and outflows, and the monetary cash account. Now, this is the column of 214, and these are the transactions in 2015. Now, these are the questions. Now, learners, the first question, we are going to calculate the balance of trade. Now, the first question is, calculate the visible balance for both years and interpret the answer. How do we get the visible balance? You remember very well, learners, when we are studying about the components of balance of payment account. Now, the visible balance, how we get the visible balance, we said it is a difference between earnings on goods exported and expenditure on goods imported. Now, the visible balance, to get the visible balance is equal to value of goods exported. We get the value of goods exported, minus the value of goods imported, minus the value of goods imported, minus the value of goods imported. The question is, we calculate the visible balance for both years and interpret your answer. Now, for 2014, let's begin with 2014, is equal to, what will be, we get the value of goods exported in 2014, goods exports. Goods exported, it is 100 million. It will be 100 million because it is in millions, 214 million francs. That will be 100 million minus goods exported, goods on imports. Goods exported in 2015, in 2014, it is 90 million. It is 90 million. If you get 100 million minus 90 million, what do we get? It will be 100 million minus 90 million. What is the figure? Learners, we shall get 10 million. That will be 10 million francs. 10 million francs. Then for 2015, goods exported, on 2015, goods exported is 50 million. Goods exported is 50 million. 50 million in 2015, the goods exported, minus goods imported. Goods imported in 2015, goods imported in 2015, it is 120 million, minus 120 million. Now, if you get 50 million minus 120 million, This is a small figure. We shall get negative 70 million. Now, we shall get negative 70 million francs. Negative 70 million francs. Then, the question, they are telling us that we interpret the answer. We have not completed the question. Now, how do we interpret the answer? We shall say for 2014, in 2014, the country enjoyed, in 2014, the country enjoyed a favorable visible balance. A favorable visible balance. Why did the country enjoy a favorable visible balance? Because the earnings on exports was greater than the expenditure on imports. The earnings on goods exported is greater than the expenditure on goods imported. Because it is 100, this is 90. Then, in 2015, we are interpreting the answer. The country experienced an unfavorable visible balance. An unfavorable visible balance. Why did the country experience an unfavorable visible balance in 2015? Because the earnings on goods exported is less than the expenditure on goods imported. That's why we got a negative, meaning now it is an unfavorable visible balance. That is the interpretation. Now, on part B, calculate the invisible balance for both years. How do we get the invisible balance for both years? Now, to get the invisible balance, which is our part B, to get invisible balance, learners, to get invisible balance is equal to the value of services exported, minus the value, because invisible trade deals with buying and selling of services. Now, value of service exported minus value of services imported, minus the value of services imported, minus the value of services imported. Now, for 2014, because it is for both years, for 2014, the value of services imported. Now, on services exported, it is 50 million in 2015. Services exported, it will be 50 million minus on services imported in 2014, because we are calculating for 2014. Now, in 2014, services imported is 150 million. It is 150 million. It will be 150 million. 150 million. Now, this is a small figure. 50 million minus 150 million, we shall get negative 100 million. We shall get negative 100 million francs. Negative 100 million francs. Now, for 2015, because it is for both years, we are calculating for both years, the invisible balance. Now, in the column of 2015, services exported in 2015, on services exported in 2015, it is 180 million. It will be 180 million minus services imported in 2015. Now, in 2015, services imported is 100 million in 2015. Services imported minus 100 million. Minus 100 million. Now, 180 minus 100 million, we shall remain with 80 million francs. Now, it is 80 million francs. It will be 80 million francs. It will be 80 million francs. Now, let's continue with the part C, learners now. Now, you can be able now to calculate the invisible balance. Now, on part C, the question is calculate the net capital flows for both years. How do we get the net capital flows for both years? Now, net capital flow, how do we get the net capital flow? Net capital flow. Remember well, learners, to get the net capital flow, we get the capital inflow minus the capital outflow. What comes into the country minus what goes out of the country. Now, it will be capital inflow. We shall get the capital inflow minus the capital outflow. Minus the capital outflow. Minus the capital outflow. Minus the capital outflow. Now, capital inflows for 2014. For 2014, what was the capital inflow? Now, capital, we go to, these are flows, capital flows. In 2014, the capital inflow is 20 million minus 30 million. It is inflow minus outflow. Now, in 2014, we shall get 20 million minus 30 million. We subtract 30 million. When you get 20 million minus 30 million, we shall get negative 10 million. Negative 10 million francs. Negative 10 million francs. Then, for net capital outflow, the net capital outflow, the net capital outflow for 2015, because we get the capital inflows. Now, in 2015, it is inflow minus outflow. If we get 350, we shall get 350 million, which is the inflow, minus the 40 million, which is the outflow. It will be 350 million minus 40 million. Minus the 40 million. Now, if you get 350 million minus 40 million, we shall get 310 million francs. This will be 310 million francs. 310 million francs. Now, the next question, it is to calculate the net transfers for both years. How do we get the net transfers for both years? Now, to get the net transfers for both years, the net transfers for both years, the formula we get transfers into the country, it will be transfers into the country, minus transfers out of the country, minus transfers out of the country, minus transfers out of the country, We are calculating for both years. Now, for 2014, it will be, now for 2014, these are transfers to the other country from the other country. Now, from the other country, we received transfers, a donation. From the other country, we received a donation or a gift. Now, we get transfers into the country minus transfers out of the country. Now, from the other country, we received a donation. Now, it will be 10 million minus 10 million, because it is transfers into minus transfers out. Now, it will be, we shall get 10 million minus 5 million, it will be, the net transfer will be 5 million. It will be 5 million francs. That will be our net transfer of 5 million francs. That will be the net transfer of 5 million francs. 5 million francs. Now, for 2015, the net transfer for 2015. Now, this is 2015. Transfers from the other country. in 2015, we received a donation or a grant of 10 million. We shall get the 10 million minus 20 million. Now, it will be 10 million minus 20 million minus 20 million. 10 million minus 20 million. We shall get negative 10 million. The net transfer in 2015 will be negative 10 million. It will be negative 10 million francs. Now, the next question is, part E, we are on part E now. Part E, that was B, C, this was D, this was D, D. Then part E, on part E, calculate the current balance for both years. How do we get the current balance, learners? The current balance, to get the current balance, you remember, learners, what we covered in when we are dealing with components of balance of payment account. To get the current balance, we said that we get the visible balance, we get the visible balance, we get visible balance plus invisible, plus the invisible balance, plus the invisible balance, plus net transfers, plus the net transfers. Now, what was, for 2014, it is for both years. For 2014, what was the visible balance, the figures, the value? For visible balance in 2014, the visible balance in 2014, remember, we got 10 million. It was 10 million plus the invisible balance in 2014, we got the invisible balance, we got negative 100 million. We got negative 100 million, negative 100 million, plus the net transfers, which was plus 5 million. Plus 5 million. Plus 5 million. Now, the net transfers, learners, this is 10 million, this is a positive, and this will be a minus. Now, this will be negative 90 million. Negative 90 million plus 5 million, we shall get negative 85 million francs. It will be negative 85 million francs. 85 million francs. Then for 2015, the current balance for 2015, we get the visible balance plus the invisible balance plus the net transfers. Now, in 2015, learners, what was the visible balance in 2015? In 2015, the visible balance was negative 70 million. It was negative 70 million plus negative 70 million plus 80 million plus 80 million plus 80 million, then plus the net transfers. In 2015, it was minus 0, plus negative 10 million, plus negative 10 million. Now, when you get negative 70 million plus 80 million, this will give you a positive 10 million. This will give you positive 10 million. Minus the 10, because the positive, this is a negative, we shall get a minus. This will be 0. Now, our current balance for 2015, it will be 0 franc. It will be a 0 franc. Then, the last question, it is, assuming no errors and omissions, what is the balance on monetary account in both years, which is M and N? Now, the balance on monetary account, to get the balance on monetary account, what will be the formula? It is, we shall get the current balance, we shall get the current balance plus the capital balance, Now, what is the current balance for 2014? For 2014, the current balance in 2014, For 214, the current balance is negative 85 million. This is negative 85 million, the current balance, plus the capital balance. To get capital balance, that is the net capital flow. The net capital flow of 214, the net capital flow of 214, the net capital flow of 214, the net capital flow of 214 was negative 10 million, plus negative 10 million, plus negative 10 million, plus negative 10 million. Now, this is a negative 85 million plus negative, we shall get negative 95 million francs. Negative 95 million francs. Now, for 215, for 215, it is current balance of 215. The current balance of 215, it will be 0 plus the net capital flow for 215. The net capital flow for 215, it is 310 million plus 310 million. 310 million. If you add, you will get 310 million. 310 million francs. That is how we calculate the current balance, visible balance, invisible balance, the current balance, the net capital outflows. Now, learners, I want to leave you with the homework. The homework, you will just do one question. By the use of a table, explain the structure of a balance of payment account by using a table. I expect you to draw a table and try to include those accounts. Current account, what do we record on the current account? What do we record on the capital account? What is recorded on cash account? And even on the errors and omissions account. Learners, I expect you now, you can be able to calculate visible balance. You can be able to calculate the invisible balance and even interpret, because we have been interpreting, like on the first question where they told us to interpret. Even you can be able to calculate the net capital flow, the current balance, and even on the balance on monetary account. I expect you can be able to calculate, if you're given a question, a table, and they tell you to calculate, you can be able to calculate those questions. Yeah. Thank you very much for being attentive. Stay safe.